Well, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast. This is your host, Caden Atzett. Brewers opening day here this afternoon at 12:40 after being postponed on Thursday. Looking forward to that matchup here we have this afternoon. A little bit disappointing yesterday. Obviously, we heard the news on Wednesday that it was going to be postponed till today, but a little bit disappointing. You just get so amped up and hyped up for opening day just to have it postponed from rain, bad weather there in New York. So it looks like this weekend, we're looking towards some better weather. Shouldn't hopefully have to deal with any more potential postponements, but we will see what we're dealing with there. But so kind of to dive into that matchup quick, we got Freddie Peralta versus Jose Quintana matching up for our pitching matchup. Big thing, I think, for the Brewers offensively is going to be matching up against that left-handed pitcher that we've struggled with in the past. Specifically, Quintana, lifetime versus Brewers, is 9-5 with a 2.9 ERA. I remember, several really good starts he posted against us with the Chicago Cubs in that extended stint that he spent with them. So, going to be interesting to see if our at-bats, if we can put together some quality at-bats against a lefty, something that we've definitely spent some time in the off-season trying to improve as far as our hitting against left-handed pitchers, as that's been one of our big struggles in the last few seasons. Another thing I kind of wanted to talk about today, obviously we've got that big matchup later today and then a couple games this weekend to kind of kick off the season here in 2024. But I wanted to talk about the roster that was announced, opening day roster, just kind of give some of my thoughts, some of my reactions. I think overall it looks like our roster is very strong to start the year. I do think, however, Pat Murphy's kind of going to adopt the Craig Counsell path of we'll have a lot of fluctuation throughout the year. I think there will be a lot of guys that, maybe struggle here that are on the roster early, might get sent down for a stint in AAA or AA or whatever it may be. And then I also think there's going to be some guys that are some more obvious players, I think, and then also just there might be some surprises that we get from AA and AAA that we're going to have called up here at some point. But overall, looking at the roster up and down, I think we've got a very young team this year, a lot of young talent, some that we're bringing back from last year. We got some new guys that are introduced to the team this year. And I think overall, the big thing that I pick out offensively that I think that's going to play a big impact on our team is it looks like we've got a lot of speed and a lot of base running threat out on the base paths. I mean, you talk about some of these guys like Terang coming back, Frelick. I mean, Yelich has always been great at stealing bases. I mean, some of these guys, Weimer, who obviously is not on the opening day roster that we'll get to here in a bit, but I think we'll probably see him up at some time this year. And a lot of these guys, even Monasterio, Churio, new guys, a lot of young talent and young speed and their ability to impact our offense on the base paths and get runners into scoring position, I think is going to put a lot more stress on these pitchers, and I think can really benefit our offense here. So with that being said, we're going to dive into the opening day roster that was released yesterday. So to start off, we got Rhys Hoskins. He's going to be the primary first baseman. Obviously acquired him from the Philadelphia Phillies in the offseason. I think he's going to be a really good piece for a lot of Brewers fans out there. Know that first base has kind of been a void in our system. We've been, searching for good first baseman. We've had some stints of some really good first basemen. We had Eric Thames, quite a few. Well, I don't know what that was, about probably 6 years ago, I'd say. I think that was 2017. Actually, probably more like 7 or 8. But we had a pretty decent stint with him where he displayed a lot of power, and then he kind of fell off. We had Shaw there for a couple years, who was kind of on and off as our primary first baseman. Obviously, Aguilar. And then even last year, I mean, I think a lot of people thought Rowdy Tellez was kind of filling that hole, and then he even showed some struggle last year. We had to pick up Santana halfway through the year. and there was a question on whether we were going to get him back or not. Obviously, that didn't work out. So I think this is a really good addition. I think Rhys Hoskins, he provides a lot of power from the right-handed position. He's a good defensive first baseman. He's really good against left-handed pitching, so that's hopefully going to kind of impact that spot that we need to fill as far as that goes. And I think he's going to play. I think he's going to do a good job in that run-producing role. I think if we get some guys in the leadoff position like Churio, Adames, Yelich that hopefully are improved on getting on base and available to get on base, I think he's going to be in a big spot to have a high RBI total this season. So we will see how that goes. It's going to be exciting to see how he performs and how he impacts the team as we progress through the season here. Coming in at second base, we've got Bryce Terang returning for his sophomore year. Definitely saw a little bit of the same struggle in spring training at the plate that we did last year during a majority of the season. He did change his approach a little bit, and in the last couple games that I saw that he was in, I really liked that he was trying to use the opposite field a lot more. I think when hitters are struggling at the plate, I think that's one of the best things to do is you try and let the ball get as deep as you can and drive it to the opposite field, especially fastballs, so then you can kind of play off the off-speed pitches and pull those. But I think, obviously, he's a great defender. He was in the argument for Gold Glove in his rookie year, so I think he's going to provide a lot of positive things defensively. And again, I mean, if he can get on base, he's got the speed, to steal. He's got the agility to steal bases and consistently. It's just the fact of being able to get on base consistently is going to be the thing that we're going to be watching the most. But Pat Murphy, at least early in the seasons, made it pretty clear that he's going to be the primary second baseman. Probably going to see Joey Ortiz, one of the new guys, thrown in there a little bit. I think he'll be rotated between second and third. But I think for the most part, Bryce Terang's the obvious second baseman for this season. We've got Oliver Dunn, who will be making his MLB debut. And Joey Ortiz, who was one of the two pieces in that Corbin Burns trade that we made to the Orioles last year. I think both of these guys put together a pretty solid spring training. I mean, they both showed that they've got pop. Oliver Dunn finished with a 404 on base percentage. So he's showing that he's got a good eye at the plate. He can draw walks, get hits pretty consistently. And then Joey Ortiz kind of shows the same thing. Both of these guys very athletic, and really excited to see how they can improve the team and see what benefit they can do. But yeah, Oliver Dunn is another one of these guys. 5 stolen bases in spring training. I mean, he's going to provide, just by being able to get on base, he's going to provide a lot of extra stress on pitchers and hopefully provide impact to our hitters in being able to get in those run-scoring positions. So excited to see these guys. Going to be interesting to see what they're able to provide for our team. And then the obvious shortstop, we got Willy Adames returning. Honestly put on kind of a tear, I thought, in spring training. 333, 6 home runs. Obviously, 3 of those were on Sunday against the Diamondbacks. But he hit 2 home runs on fastballs. One of them was on an off-speed pitch. So looks like he also changed his batting stance and his approach a little bit. And I think, with that, I think that can provide a lot of extra offense. Obviously, the first year that he came over, we saw a lot of that really positive offensive impact. And then last year, it kind of seemed like it was on and off, more so off than it was on. So he's obviously a clear-cut great shortstop. So defensively, we have no issues there. But it's whether or not, again, he's able to provide that offensive pop, give us that offensive boost in one of the, another run-scoring position. I would think, based on what Pat Murphy was playing him in spring training, it looks like he'll probably fit like a 5 role, I'm assuming, in the batting lineup. So we'll see if that kind of stands true. Another thing that stuck out to me for him, though, was also that 400 on base percentage. A big thing that he was looking at last year was to improve his walks, and I think he's done exactly that. Looks like, he's able to continue that approach where he's getting into long counts, getting into some quality at bats, and as long as he can stay consistent with that, I think he's going to put together a pretty good year. Now, I do think one interesting thing about Adames is I do think that if he struggles and the Brewers have not put themselves in a position to make a postseason run by the All-Star break, which hopefully that is not the case for all us fans out there, but I can very much potentially see a trade midseason before the deadline. I think him and Corbin Burns kind of got most of the attention in the offseason as far as trading. And obviously, we ended up seeing that with Corbin Burns. We didn't see that with Willy Adames, but I think he's going to have to put together some positive numbers. I think the Brewers are going to have to be in a spot where they're in a postseason run by the All-Star break. Otherwise, I do think that seeing him traded in midseason could be a potential there. Probably look out for some more talent, maybe get some prospects or something, whatever it may be. Or if we have, as we develop through this year, we may figure out that we have a void that needs to be filled. But overall, I'm excited to see the year he's going to put together. I think he's going to be an improved hitter. I think he's going to go back kind of to how he was when he first came over to the Brewers and be able to provide that consistent and constant offensive impact. So we're going to see how that plays out. Moving over to outfielders, we've got Christian Yelich obviously returning, Sal Frelick returning for his sophomore year, Jackson Chourio, who will be making his MLB debut, going to be the youngest MLB starter this year for opening day on an opening day roster, so that's really exciting. Obviously signed him to that extended contract, and I think that's going to play out well with the Brewers' market space and not having much. I think the only way that we're going to be able to keep these prime players is going to be able to, kind of take a chance, sign them early, sign them to an extended contract, because otherwise they're going to put together a couple of really strong seasons, and other teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets that can pay these guys a lot more, those are going to be the ones that are the front runners because they've got the money to offer when we're just kind of left behind without much to offer there. So definitely looking forward to seeing him display his athleticism. We saw it all spring training. He hit .323. He had 2 stolen bases along with that, and he had the highest hit total for any Brewer in spring training. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see him play. Really looking forward to seeing what he can provide to our offense. And like I said, Christian Yelich returning, that was a clear one. He had a pretty good spring training. Sal Frelick also had a good spring training. All these guys are fast. I think they're going to be really good in the outfield defensively, and I think they're going to provide some really good offense for our team too. Also got Blake Perkins returning as his sophomore year. A lot of sophomore returners from last year. He had a pretty solid spring training, and just another guy that's quick. He had 4 stolen bases as well in spring training. So I think all these guys are going to provide that speed and athleticism on the field if they're able to get on base. We've got Jake Bauers as a utility guy and Andrew Monasterio filling in our utilities. Jake Bauers acquired from the Yankees, will be making his Brewers debut, and Andrew Monasterio returning for his sophomore year, also had a really solid spring training. So that's going to be really fun to see those guys return. I think we'll see a rotation for Bauers in kind of a DH spot. Didn't look like he got a ton of opportunity defensively this spring training. I think we'll see Andrew Monasterio thrown in there at potentially second base sometimes, third base. They both kind of fit that role of that the Brewers love to have guys like these that are utility players where you can throw them in at any spot and go along with that. So I think we'll see Jory Ortiz at third. We'll see Oliver Dunn at third. We'll see Monasterio at third. Probably see Ortiz at second a little bit. See Monasterio at second potentially as well. I think Bauers can play some first base. I'm not entirely sure. I can't recall exactly where they were playing him during spring training. But in that utility role, I think they're all going to provide some extra offense and defensive help when they need it. I think if Pat Murphy kind of follows Craig Counsell's philosophy like we saw with Owen Miller last year, where you're going to ride the hot hand. If a guy is a positive hitter and he's able to provide some consistent offense, I mean, there's no other reason than to not put him in the lineup on a daily basis. We saw that a little bit the last couple years with Brasso too, when he got on his on and off hot stints. We saw him in the lineup, on a day-by-day basis when he was swinging the bat well. So I think we're going to see some of these guys have the same kind of impact and same kind of playing time depending on their performance. And then for catchers, we've got William Contreras returning. That's an obvious one. And then we have Gary Sanchez, who's a little bit of a head-scratcher from the fact that Eric Haas yesterday got designated for assignment. And Eric Haas put on a tear of a spring training. He had 5 home runs, led the team, 14 RBIs. I think Willie led the team with 15 RBIs. But, he hit .395, .465 on base percentage, 1.334 OPS. From my perspective, I don't know what more Haas could have done offensively to make a roster spot. I think the Brewers must have kind of determined that Gary Sanchez was going to be the guy right away. I was looking at their defensive numbers. They both have pretty identical defensive numbers, even though Gary Sanchez, I think, gets the worst rap for being a poor catcher. I think it looked like they both had about the same defensive stats. And, Gary Sanchez does provide that right-handed pop, and he's good against left-handed pitching, so, there's that bonus too. And I think it just kind of tied into the fact that the Brewers are only planning to carry 2 catchers on their roster, at least for now. But I personally was hoping that we could see Eric Haas signed to a minor league deal. I'm guessing he's going to be picked up by some other team based on just the tear of a spring training he put on. That was just the one thing I was mainly confused on, was trying to figure out what more he could have shown in order to earn an opening day roster spot. Because, on paper and by watching him, he did everything he could offensively. He was limited to 38 at-bats and then, 5 home runs with a .395 batting average. He was just putting on a tear at the plate, so I'm not exactly sure what more he could have done there. But anyway, not much obviously anybody can do. We'll see. Hopefully Gary Sanchez is able to provide some extra offense and give rest for William Contreras. And I'm assuming when we don't see William Contreras in there defensively, he's going to be in there in the DH spot, and probably vice versa for Gary Sanchez, especially if it's a left-handed pitcher, for example, today against Jose Quintana of the Mets. So we'll see how that goes there. Moving into pitching, I think pitching is definitely going to be the biggest head-scratcher of the year. I think there's definitely some holes to fill with Corbin Burnes being gone. We've got Woodruff going to be out. He announced that he's going to be out this entire season now, taking it off to let his shoulder completely heal. And I think that's probably a wise idea. It's going to stink not having him potentially. I still think there could be a potential if we're in a postseason run that maybe we see him at the very tail end or in a postseason appearance. But I think it's probably best in his health to, stay off the field, let that shoulder heal, and come back strong hopefully next year. And we'll see what he's able to provide. But moving on from that, starting 5, we got Freddie Peralta, like I said, DL Hall, left-handed pitcher, who was the second piece in that acquisition of trading Corbin Burnes to the Orioles. I think he had a really solid spring training. I watched him pitch on Sunday against the Diamondbacks, and I saw a lot of good things. Looked like he was struggling early with fastball command, and he used his off-speed pitch just as well to dial it back in, and then his fastball, after he had that off-speed pitch dialed in, that fastball played off so much better on that off-speed pitch, and then he cruised. He had one inning where he struggled, and then he cruised the rest of the way through. So that was a really great appearance. Hopefully, that was a great way for him to finish off spring training, and hopefully he's able to carry that into this year. We'll see him on Saturday against the Mets, which we'll get into those matchups here towards the end. But we got Colin Rea going to be in that 3 spot of the pitching rotation, obviously returning from the Brewers last year, and I thought he put together a really strong season. There wasn't really anything that I saw that I didn't like. I mean, obviously filling a hole for Brandon Woodruff isn't an easy task by any means, and I think he posted an ERA in the 4s, but still, I thought he provided good long outings. He usually came in 5 or 6 innings, and honestly, in that role, that's all you can look for. Not a hard thrower, but if his location's on, he showed last year that he can be, he can put up zeros. He can be just as good of a pitcher as some of our other guys as well. So I think he's going to be interesting, expecting some big things for him this season, hoping he's able to put together a solid season for our pitching staff. And then we've got the additions of Joe Ross and Jacob Junis to finish out the pitching rotation for the starting 5. I think they're both going to be, they both had some pretty solid starts there in spring training as well. So hoping that they're able to provide some good outings as well. And I think there's going to probably be some movement throughout the season, especially dealing with injuries like we typically do. Aaron Ashby right now obviously did not make the opening day roster. I think he's a prime candidate as he kind of still finds his feel for pitching. I think he'll be a prime candidate for returning in the starting rotation and get another lefty in there at some point this season. But to finish out the bullpen, we've got Trevor McGill, who I think is going to be our primary closer here to start the season, with the dismissal of Devin Williams here for the first 2 or 3 months as he tries to battle those back fractures that he's been dealing with. Definitely stinks to have him out, as us Brewer fans have been blessed to have him and Josh Hader. As much as people may not like them and say they don't like them, we have had 2 of the best closers in baseball for, cover the last 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, it's been amazing to have them pitch for us in closing games for us in big spots, and they've done a fantastic job. So that's going to be interesting to have somebody else filling that role for a significant part of the season here, especially the start of the season. So we might see that role switch around a little bit too as we figure that out as we progress here through the season. We've got Yoel Payamps returning, Abner Uribe, Hobie Milner, Elvis Peguero, Thiago Vieira, who we saw some stints up and down with him last year, showed that he's got some nasty stuff. Definitely struggled with some walks last year, but as far as hits goes, I think he was pretty solid, and like I said, he shows that he's got the stuff. A lot of the Brewers bullpen this year is returning from last year. Bryce Wilson coming back, and then Brian Hudson, a new addition, also to our roster, also to the bullpen. Think Hudson and Wilson are probably going to be those roles that come in for multiple innings. If a starter has a short stint or an injury or something of that matter, or in the best case we're up enough runs where we're not going to need our best pitchers to come in, we can give them a day off, and Wilson or Hudson can come in and throw 2-3 innings to finish out a game. So I think it's a positive that we have a lot of the same bullpen returning, because honestly our bullpen was pretty solid last year. The only thing that's interesting to me, which we did, I guess, have the same issue a little bit last year, is Hobie Milner is our only lefty currently out of the bullpen. So Pat Murphy's ability to be able to play those lefty-lefty matchups is going to be, it's going to be a little bit more hit and miss depending on Hobie Milner's availability. If he pitched the day before, I think he can usually go 2 days in a row, and then that third day you usually give him off. So that might be a little bit of a struggle we see, that we're not able to play those matchups as well. But I think overall it's a positive. I think it's really good that we have the the same bullpen returning. I think it was a really positive thing that we did have last year was a solid bullpen. So yeah, that is what the opening day roster looks like. I mean, overall, I think it's pretty much what everybody expected we were going to see. But nonetheless, I do think there are going to be some guys, like I said, I think the Brewers are kind of going to have this roster where it kind of bounces as to who's in there. I think we're going to see some different guys come in at different times. I think, like I said, Aaron Ashby, I think, is going to be making an appearance at some point this year. I'm assuming we'll see Joey Wiemer pop up here at some point this year. Guys like, Owen Miller, I think he put together a pretty solid spring, and I thought he was a candidate to make the opening day roster, but I think we had some other young talent that we wanted to try and throw in there. But I think we could see him up at some point this year, especially depending on injuries and whatnot. And then I think on the pitching side, I mentioned Aaron Ashby. I think J.B. Bukauskas, who we saw a couple stints with him last year, he showed that he had some good stuff. I think that we could see him up here at some point. And then Jansen Junk, still kind of returning off of that lengthy injury from last year. He's been battling some injury for the last couple years. I think he showed some positive things in spring training too. Definitely some tweaks and things he needs to work on that hopefully he's able to work out in AAA or AA, whatever it may be, and work out some of those problems. And I think we'll see him up at some point this year too. But even then, we've got a lot of more positive young talent, guys like Wes Clark, Brewer Hicklin, Tyler Black, Jefferson Cuero. I think all these guys we could see at some time. Even Jacob Misiorowski, pitching flamethrower. I think a lot of these guys we could see at some point in stints this year, depending on injuries and depending on how they perform in those minor league systems. So I'm excited to see how they perform and see if they're able to make an impact on our team at some point this year as well. But nonetheless, that kind of wraps up what I wanted to talk about here as far as the roster. Just the last couple things. Obviously, we got the matchup today here this afternoon, actually only in about an hour and a half or so. But Saturday matchup, looking ahead, we've got D.L. Hall versus Luis Severino. So we're going to see D.L. Hall for the first time as a Brewer. I think I'm really excited to see what he's able to produce for our pitching staff this year. I think he's got some great command. His fastball and his off-speed pitches play really well off of each other. So excited to see that. And then to finish up the series on Sunday, we've got Colin Rea versus Tyler McGill for the New York Mets. So going to get a little dose of Colin Rea in there and see if he's changed at all from last year, and see if he's been able to improve anything in spring training. I think, like I said, I think he showed some really positive things in spring training, but I think it's going to be exciting to see these guys get a more consistent role as we start the season. So yeah, that is going to wrap up my discussion here. I think I will be posting the next podcast. I'll probably wait until the end of this series. So thinking either like a Sunday night, Monday morning type thing. We'll kind of go over all of the results of the weekend. Maybe talk about some of the individual player performances. Talk about some things that stood out. Maybe, positive or negative that we can discuss about there as we get into the first series of the 2024 season. I also wanted to inform you guys, so Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast is now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and a lot of the other mainstream podcast sites. I was able to get those uploaded onto those sites, so feel free to go listen to them wherever it is you may want in the future. So that will be available there. And yeah, you guys can reach me at social media using @brew_pod on Twitter or searching Brew Pod Between the Lines on Facebook or Instagram. And hope you guys are all able to catch some of the game today, depending on if you're at work or wherever you may be, and then hopefully catch some of the games this weekend and get back to watching some consistent games and watching Brewer baseball. So with that being said, we'll see you next time and talk to you soon. And of course, go Brewers.